Hey, everybody, it is Lauren DeLisa Coleman here with you for the Inside series, and I am so excited. We are kicking off the DOC NYC Film Festival. This is our very first interview of this whole series that will be coming up, bringing you really inside, just like the series says, inside the minds of some of the filmmakers who have works that are being shown during this festival, and just such a variety and so many interesting and very cool topics. So I am really excited to bring this to you. Don't forget to watch each and every one, but let's start with this one. I have the wonderful Sherman De Jesus with me, who is just touched down here in the States, from Europe, Holland to be exact, who is the filmmaker behind The Photograph. And I think that you guys are going to love hearing about this because it's just so well done, but brings up issues in a new light. But let Mr. De Jesus tell you about all of this himself. First of all, Sherman, thank you so much for joining us here at your hotel room here in New York.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you have The Photograph that is being shown during the film festival. Can you first tell us a little bit about what the film, is trying to convey?
The film started because I had this small photograph of my grandfather. And this is the only photo I had of him, by him. And it didn't tell me so much because he died before I was born. But at a certain moment, and that has to do with internet, I found out that the address on the back of the photo directed me to James van der Zee, who is a very famous, legendary photographer of Harlem Renaissance. And then it's like I woke up. I said, this is the opportunity to link this seaman, my grandfather, who was a seaman from Curacao, from the Caribbean, to link him to this sophisticated photographer in Harlem. From that point on, it started. And so we're sitting here because my grandfather had the idea to go to James van der Zee to make a photo of himself in New York, in Harlem, which was a very special place at that time.
So now, was he the first, generation of your family to come from Curacao to the States, to Harlem specifically?
He was a seaman, he wasn't really a migrant, he was a seaman. He came here often. But when you were a seaman at the time, in the 1920s, you were a black man, that the first place you went to is Harlem, because that was a safe place to be, where you could be everywhere. You could go dancing, drinking, doing other things seamen do.
Tell me a little bit about this journey, because it was, I'm sure, a major undertaking. As I mentioned, of course, we've seen numerous works, whether it's in print, video, whatever, film, about the Harlem Renaissance. But this one has a really unique and special, kind of twist. You went, through much research and a number of different subjects to kind of be able to pull out maybe stories and feelings and sentiment about the Harlem Renaissance that, I kind of felt were very fresh. So how did you go about that? And wasn't it very, very challenging? And did you come back and forth to do all of this, or how did it kind of go? Because just offline, you guys, he and I were speaking about the fact that he was born in Curacao, for those who may not know, is near Aruba, but is, now based in Holland, in Amsterdam, right? And neither one is Harlem, right? So how did all this come about, Sherman?
I started showing, we went with I had a very, a cameraman, Milton Kem, who lived in Harlem, who knew Harlem very well. And what we did was travel with this photograph, showing it to people. The first person I showed it to was the widow of James van der Zee. And then I showed it to Charles Daniel Dawson, one of the connoisseurs of the work of James van der Zee. And people were very friendly, very kind the way they received us with the show. They were charmed by the fact that this guy came all the way from Europe with his small piece of paper. And so they were very charmed. And from the one thing came the other. And I didn't have an idea beforehand what I wanted to do. I just wanted to see what would happen if I show this photograph to people and how they would react. And that's how the film started. I didn't have a preconceived idea I want to tell this story. And so it even surprised myself what we have now. And I really think more people say it's a very original story. And I believe that now I also believe that. Yeah.
Now, how long was this whole adventure, Sherman, like from beginning to end? Like when you made the first trip to Harlem with the photograph to, I guess, let's say maybe final edits.
Yeah, we started, the first day of research was the day Donald Trump won the election. And we started with this new project. And at the same time, we were very depressed that this guy won the election in the Americas. That was like in 2016, I think. And then we finished just before Corona started. We were editing, we were finishing editing. So it took and then we had to wait for Corona before we could present the film to festivals. And now the first place it was shown was in the Netherlands Film Festival in Amsterdam, close to Amsterdam. And now we are in New York, presented it to the people of New York.
So what do you think about that? Not bad, right? For a gentleman who did not really intend to start out making a film, who was just holding a photograph, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I really think it's because it became a very important story. It's in reality, it's a story of finding dignity. It's a story about the African people in the Americas, not only in the United States, but also in the Caribbean. And I think in the essence, it tells a very simple story that it's all the same people. You have African Americans are Americans, but they are just like the Afro-Caribbeans. We are all descending from Africa. And for me, that was a very important message of this film, to be reminded that we have a common history, that we have very much things similar, that are similar to each other.
I love how you, just mentioned about that it's a story about dignity, because I wrote this down because it just hit me when I was watching that there was a line in the film that, like, during this moment of the Harlem Renaissance, Black people were not asking to be who they were. They were telling you who they were. And I just found that very, very interesting. I think that we know that maybe, subconsciously or whatever, but to have it like kind of phrased like that, I just thought was very, very cool. It kind of reminds me of maybe like in hip hop, how there's like just kind of this unabashed kind of just positioning of this is like me, and I'm proud of that, and I'm not really trying to explain it. Either you get it or you don't, but I'm proud of whatever that is. And I think that we probably hadn't really seen that, and whether people are into that image or not is another story. But we probably had not really seen that since like the Harlem Renaissance, because then there was that whole period of, trying to acclimate to and be like, the larger mainstream. But this particular moment, I think, was very interesting for Black America, because it, was just a moment, I guess, of pride and maybe a lot of what would we call this, when you can kind of just self-sustaining, right, as well. With their own clubs and et cetera, et cetera. It was just very cool to hear some of the people who you interviewed talking about that. What for you was maybe the most I don't know, either surprising or interesting that you found out as you were talking to people and creating this work? I mean, was there a moment where you just were like, wow, I can't believe it was like that, or maybe something that was just very emotional for you?
It was the whole journey was very emotional, and it has to do. I discovered that afterwards, to do with this feeling of a common, common pain, you could say, that I recognize. Of course, I knew the story of Afro-America in all the things, the music, the histories, but being in Harlem in these times, it really hit me. One of the places I loved most was the tribute to the ancestors, which is also in the film. The film ends with this scene in Coney Island. And for me, watching this reminded me of a lot of things I saw in Curacao, which were almost the same, the way of dancing, the way people expressed joy and pain and those kind of things. So that was a very important moment for me in the film, the tribute to the ancestors. And I loved very much shooting in the church in Harlem during a service, and to see the ecstasy and the joy and the happiness people had on Sunday. A lot of things. I think it's a very rich film, but it's very rich because I think Harlem, and in the States, we are reviving a kind of, and there's like a new renaissance going on now. You can see it in the arts, you can see it in paintings, a lot of names, the music you mentioned, hip hop, literature. So there's like a very strong thing happening now, which is comparable, I think, with the Harlem Renaissance in the 20s.
I think it's so interesting that you say that. I wonder, if when people were actually entrenched in that moment, if they knew that or not. You know how they always say, like, when you're living history, right? You're just like, it's today, whatever's happening, right? And then later on, people will look back and be like, did you realize that you were in the midst of whatever? And you're like, no, I went to go get groceries and I went and looked at this art exhibit and then I listened to music and that was life, right? It wasn't some massive moment. But I think it's really just so astute of you to be able to say right now, like maybe there is that whole, a neo-Renaissance going on that's not necessarily Harlem, but maybe just a kind of people of color Renaissance. That is happening. And I think it's going to be very interesting to watch, right? Especially as it intersects with all other things that are happening, at the same time. Talk to me a little bit about your filmmaking background and experience, because that had obviously a lot of impact on the creation of this project.
Yeah, but that's a very big story, a long story.
Well, you can give us the condensed version, but let's just say this is not your first time at the rodeo, as we say, right?
I've been working in Holland, and we work especially for public television. That's the way we finance the films. And Holland has a difference. I think it's different than the States, that you can work with subsidies and with public money.
Yes.
So that makes it, I believe, maybe, I'm not sure, more easier to make a film about a subject that you don't really know what you're going to do. And so that's where we were functioning in Europe. And I'm very happy that I always had this opportunity. For example, this film, it was the photograph. People recognize very early that it could become an important film. So it was really, we got the financing in place very soon, very quick.
How big was your team for this, Sherman, the crew and all?
Very small.
And were they American and based here? Or did you bring them from Holland or a whole mixture or what?
No, I came. Milton Kahn is a cinematographer who studied in New York, but he's from Suriname. So I worked with him because I needed somebody who knew Harlem and who felt at home in Harlem. And the sound man is Gautam Chuduri. He is a person from Manhattan. And I had Carlton Mabry, who was production manager in New York. And we had a very small team, like we were 3 or 4 people. And we were just, walking around in Harlem and see what's happening.
That's very cool.
And hoping we will get presents from the divinity.
Very nice.
Does it make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, it does.
It's not okay.
Yes. So, I mean, I'm sure that you learned so many things, right, from this film, from the making of this film, that were certainly not just personal, but as, a technical filmmaker. What would you say was like, your biggest, kind of value from this, or something that you learned that even surprised you with so many years of expertise?
As a filmmaker, you mean in the filmmaking process?
Yes.
I think it's still, you have to trust that you have to start somewhere, and you make it happens when you go along, that you don't really, it's not only for documentaries, but you always have to trust that you don't need to know everything beforehand to let it go. And I think I'm convinced that that's the only way to do art and to make films. Mm-hmm. That you let it happen. My philosophy is to do as little as possible on the set. I really don't. I don't even want to be there, because I don't want to influence too much what's happening when we are working. I don't want people to do things to please me, but to be themselves as much as possible.
That's so interesting. Do you feel that you get a more authentic and true piece of work the more you remove yourself or bring the volume down on yourself?
Yeah.
That takes a very special personality, I think, especially as a filmmaker, no?
It has to do with that you always have to be prepared to be surprised by reality, by not to, there are things we do not understand about reality, about life. And they are still there, and you know them, everybody knows this. So you have to prepare yourself to let it loose. Otherwise, you start telling the same story over and over again. And there was something other but this was before I started, and that has to do with the African American reality, I think. I was discussing my project with a very eminent person called Deborah Willis. You probably know her, and a photographer and a professor. And I had a script with a lot of caricatures of Black people in the script that I thought I would be using in the film. And she said, don't do that. Don't repeat these same caricatures in your film, because we've seen these images already. And let it loose. And that was a very important moment in the making of this film. And I think she was very right. It's a very wise person.
So it's good that you're giving her a shout out now then. She was so critical to the creative process. I'm sure she will be happy that you are giving her a shout out now.
Yeah. We should be critical about to each other. Yeah. Also, of course.
So is there anything else that you might like to add, Sherman, about either the process or the film or anything else?
No, that's really, I hope it really that people will go and see the film. And I think it's they will enjoy it, and it's a very special film.
Yes, definitely.
About the very special people.
Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. I hope that you have a wonderfully successful screening at the festival. And I thank you again for just, creating a schedule and this moment for us, because I know we had a little back and forth. So again, thank you. Thank you so much, Sherman. Really.
Thank you.
Continued success with the photograph.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you guys for watching. You can find out more about the photograph online if you just Google the photograph and Sherman De Jesus. If you are in New York and have a chance to see this wonderful documentary, don't hesitate. Thank you again, as always, for watching the Inside series. I am Lauren DeLisa Coleman.